Welcome back to the Wingspan Podcast, episode 20. I'm Doug Barak, joined by my co-host Chris Mulholland of NetsDaily and our special guest. Our guest is a videographer and video journalist for AccuWeather and content creator for Backpack Broadcasting.
We welcome Dexter Henry to the podcast. Thank you for taking some time out of your evening to join Doug and I. What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm good, guys. How are you doing? I'm glad to be here. Honored to be part of this podcast in the 20th episode. You guys are doing a great job. I'm good.
Appreciate it.
Just taking things day by day, and we're glad to have you a part of it.
Yeah, that's all you can do.
So I guess let's kick it off first, but mostly what you've been up to since COVID-19 happened and put the sports world at halt, what you've been doing, what you've been up to, and kind of just take it as it is.
Yeah, so, it changed life for everybody, right? It changed work. It changed how we live. In terms of work, I'm still, reporting for AccuWeather, still doing stuff, but I've been doing much more from home than I ever have. So a lot of my interviews that I do for my stories are via Skype or Zoom. I'm, stepping out occasionally to do certain things like live shots, but not as much. So that's changed a little bit. But what this has allowed me to do in a way too, I'm still doing my podcast, Ain't Hard Tell Podcast, but I'm also been working on some stuff I've been working on before, like Sideline Stories, a series, and doing some other stories around sports that I probably actually hadn't had as much time to do before. So this has been a nice time to get back and work on some personal projects. So that's been fun, but that's pretty much what I've been up to. Staying safe. That's the best thing I think we all can do. So just, staying safe, only going out when I have to, and, taking this very seriously to protect myself and my family, as I know a lot of New Yorkers are doing, and a lot of other people around the country. So yeah, that's just been it. Just enjoying the time I have in life, and, trying to make the most of it. And
how's homeschooling?
How's homeschooling going? So my daughter, she's 4, right? And so she'll be 4 in a couple weeks, and she has been out of preschool for a little bit now, and so we're not doing as much homeschooling with her. Like her school, they were doing some kind of like yoga stuff and stuff that she could check in. So now we've been day by day on our own teaching her like how to read. So she's starting to, sound out words and teaching her a little bit of writing. So that's kind of been the extent of the homeschooling. We don't have it as bad as some other people. I was just talking to one of my other neighbors, her kids are like, they're, I think 8 and 10 and, or like 10, no, excuse me, 8 and 4. And the kids are just like, they can't wait. They're sick of school and sick of the homeschooling. So a lot of parents with some older kids or slightly older kids, they have a little tougher. So it hasn't been that bad. It's been okay.
And then first of all, congrats on the 6-year anniversary. I saw that on Twitter this morning.
Thank you. Of Sideline Stories. It's somewhere around 6 years. Yeah. And shout out to Bob Windrum, who
great guy.
Great guy. Founder, editor of NetsDaily, who gave me some good advice to start that Sideline Stories series. He really pushed me to do that. So I'm grateful for that.
And now I got to ask you too, with working from home, what are some advantages that you've kind of came across from kind of working at home?
I think, I think the biggest advantage is, I think I actually feel more in control of my day. I know some people have told me the opposite, but I do, right? Because my day more so was getting up, right? Taking my daughter to school and then trying to produce whatever story I had to do for that day in something of a 6 to 7 hour window, right? Before I picked my daughter up from school or whatever it was. And so now I could kind of I feel like my days are mapped up a little bit better. I might sometimes do an interview a day before. I might, have time to work on things a little bit more. And I can get up a little bit later. I'm not getting up as early, which is nice. It's always nice to sleep in a little bit longer. But I actually have more time to work. And I actually felt like I've used my time. Maybe we don't have more time. I had a conversation with somebody about this. Since we're not moving, we have to figure out how we're going to use our time more efficiently, right, guys? So that's kind of what I've been doing more. So it's been work, spending time with my family, my daughter, trying to work out, stay physically fit. That's something I've been giving more time to, which I love to do. So that's kind of been the advantages. I think just actually being able to just navigate a little bit more stuff around work instead of feeling as rushed as I used to. I think that's been the big revelation to me, Chris, is that I felt more rushed. I was like going here, going there, doing this. I'm not necessarily as exhausted, and I'm probably taking better care of my body honestly. Yeah, that's the biggest advantage. Yeah.
I could agree with that. I feel like the structure, especially when you're home doing work, don't get me wrong, the structure is great. But I get you want to be out in the world, you want to be doing stuff because obviously the ability of going out, your work content increases, kind of just the creativity behind it. But I could agree with kind of the structure is more set when you're inside. Your day structure, you know what to do at certain times. You kind of adjust very well to that.
Yeah, no, you definitely do. Absolutely.
Yeah, my only personal take on it is like I wish for certain jobs and positions, depending on how the work from home structure is, that you don't have to wake up early, you know, roll out of bed in a comfortable pace. That way you feel well rested and uplifted as you're doing, you know, pretty much the same thing more or less throughout the day. So even if your day starts later and, you know, your night ends earlier because of it, at least, you know, it doesn't feel as uncomfortable. I don't know how to properly phrase it, but
that makes a lot of sense to me.
Because I'm like waking up at 7:30 for an 8:30. Yeah, I could wake up probably a little bit later, but I need my mind to like get to that point before I can start doing my day and then still end at about 5. But me personally, I feel like in this situation, maybe pushing everything back an hour wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if I had that type of, you know, feet control.
I agree. My podcast co-host Brian Fonseca he thinks shifts are stupid, right? Like he absolutely hates the fact that there are shifts, and that kind of goes to your point, Doug, right? Where it's that if you're still going to do the same job that you do within that whatever 8-hour period, right? Like, what does it matter if you want to do it from 10:30 to 7:30 as opposed to 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 or whatever it is, right? Like, you can still get it done, and maybe it just works better for your lifestyle. So I don't know. Yeah. I hope your job can listen to you on that. I hope
so. Especially in this format, because once we're open, you know, throwing that idea away. But anyways, so when did you begin watching the NBA? What was one of your first memories? And what was your favorite team growing up?
So my favorite team growing up was the New York Knicks. Just diehard New York Knicks fan growing up. And so my first real memories of the Knicks, I was just talking with one of my best friends about this the other day. It was the 1992 playoffs. The Knicks played Detroit in the first round, and they beat them in 5. And I watched that series, and I liked the way they played with Xavier McDaniel and Patrick Ewing. I just liked the toughness of the way the Knicks played that time, and Detroit was kind of on the way down. And so that's what really sparked me into being a Knicks fan. And I just love basketball. That's my favorite sport. I played it. I've always just loved the sport. And ever since then, you know, I just became a Knicks fan and dealt with a lot of suffering in my life. So that's what happens when you're a Knicks fan.
And then can you just talk a little about your journey to where you are today? What college you went to, your first sports media position or internship, kind of just tracing it all the way back to where did it all begin for Dexter Henry?
Yeah, I think, you know, when you say where it all begins, I think it really all began for me that I always had a love of sports, but I also always had this love of writing. When I was in school, just as early as elementary school, even going to middle school, I bought a newspaper every day. I used to always read the sports section. I did that all the time. I don't think then I knew I would be doing what I did now. I didn't see journalism totally as a viable option. But then when I went to school at the University of Pittsburgh for college, I actually went in as an athletic training major and very quickly realized that I did not care for science or learning it as much as I thought I did. So I moved over to journalism, and one of the best decisions I ever made. And really, while I was at Pitt is not a school known for journalism, right, guys? It's not Syracuse or Fordham. It doesn't have that sort of cachet, which is why I always tell a lot of younger people it's not necessarily where you go, but it's about what you do with the opportunities you get. And while at Pitt, I had the opportunity to work for the Panther Sports Network, started by my mentor, Jamoke Davis. And it was just an opportunity for us kids who love sports and broadcast television to create our own content. So I worked on a show called In the Paint for 2 years. Shout out to my friend Matt Grubba, who hosted it with me. And we covered the Pitt basketball team. And so a lot of good times doing that. And then I got an internship at KDKA, which is the local CBS affiliate in Pittsburgh, for a semester, did some really good work there. After I graduated Pitt, I'd sent out, because I really wanted to do stuff on TV, and I sent out, you know, resume tapes to a bunch of places, and nothing came. I heard nothing just got rejected by almost every station. And so I came back to New York and actually started my career writing. So my career started in print journalism. I wrote for a small paper called the Brooklyn Skyline. And then I'm not going to belabor you guys with too much details, but then after that, I did jobs like I worked at CBS News Productions for a little bit. And then I think what I always tell people when I tell this story, I say the most influential job I had, or I think the most important job I had, was I worked at MLB.com in 2006 I did it for 2 summers, I believe. And so my job was I was a game night editor, and I basically edited video, like all the highlights you would see on the website and stuff like that. And the reason I say it was the most important job is it allowed me to become a really skilled and fast editor. And that helped me in my next job, which was being a video journalist for the New York Post. And I did that for about 4 years. And then through another company I worked for, they did some video for them. And then after that, I was working for St. Francis College and NetsDaily, in News 12 at the time, before landing at AccuWeather, which I started in 2018 until now. So I've done a lot of stuff in my career, but, sports news, weather reporting now. But, I took some advice that Stephen A. Smith gave me a long time ago, which was take advantage of any opportunity that comes your way that you think actually can help you. And I've always kept that in mind for what I want to do and try to push myself as a journalist. And so, yeah, that's the journey of Dexter Henry from Pitt or before to AccuWeather now.
That's cool. And listening to that, I have a lot of takeaways, a lot of similarities to that. Obviously, as someone who's just graduating college, I didn't go to a school that's well known for journalism like Syracuse, Missouri, like you. And one question rose to my mind is, what were some of your biggest takeaways in college when you were kind of studying at a school that wasn't known for its journalism program? Did you see any kind of disadvantages, advantages at the time? Kind of what were some of your major takeaways from your studies there?
I think at the time when you're in it, you don't see it as much, what you're questioning, Chris. Yep. But I think where you saw it, or I actually maybe first creeped in my mind, is one time during Pitt, we went up to Syracuse for a basketball game. And that was my first time on campus, University of Syracuse University. And, you noticed how the kids there in their media production program, you saw what they did around the game, and you just saw how much more money was in that program and access to gear and different things you had. And I wondered if, at the time, I was like, well, does that really give these kids a leg up over me, right? And access in many forms of life matters, right, in terms of people getting advantages. But the one thing I could say I had at Pitt, which I was fortunate, and it was better than any other class I had, was my mentor, who I mentioned before, Jamoke Davis, who started the Panther Sports Network. He was older than me, so he's about 9 years older than me, and he was coming back to school after having worked in the industry, and was currently working in the industry as a TV producer and a sports TV producer for a local Pittsburgh affiliate. So the reason I say that is I had a direct connection to somebody who I could talk about the industry all the time while I was in college. That was probably valuable, in my opinion, more than any other school could give me. So it was somebody whose brain I could pick all the time, who I learned things about, how to make a package, how to make stories better, how to change my voice inflection, all these different things. So I had this really great, amazing sort of, if you want to say it, on-the-job training without being on the job. And that's not necessarily something you get at every school or every internship. It's the other reason why I tell a lot of younger people who want to get into journalism is the best thing you could do is go out and actually do stuff. Like all the stuff you learn in the classroom, like that's great, but nothing beats actually getting out to games, interviewing people, talking to people, recording a podcast interview, right? How do you learn to talk to people and be personable and learn how to create good stories unless you're getting out there doing it? Nothing beats hands-on experience. So I think at the time you doubt it because you're young and you don't understand everything about the world. And you think so much of the stock was placed in us and say, hey, you got to go to this school, right? You got to be in this program. You have to be here to get here. And it's not necessarily true. It's just, I was fortunate. I didn't appreciate it maybe all the time, but I went to Pitt at a time where the basketball team rose very well and the football team was doing extremely well. Larry Fitzgerald was there. So I went at this fantastic time where all this stuff happened. And sometimes timing just works out for you. But yeah, man, I didn't see that then as a problem. I thought about it when I first saw like those kids at Syracuse, but then I think I realized it kind of put a chip on my shoulder. Like, all right, you got to be better than those kids because they had disadvantage.
I could agree with that on so many levels because I always say to myself, and especially with friends too, nothing beats in-person experience being out there in the real world with other people that do this for a living. Because I even told people all the time, if I didn't have the opportunities such as when I started at Elite Sports and Fanside and worked my way up to NetsDaily, going to actual games, events, media days, and stuff like that, I wouldn't be that ready coming out of college if I didn't have that experience. Because like you said, you can't train people in the classroom how to talk to athletes, especially with sports journalists like ourselves. There's certain things, especially with talking with athletes and stuff, you have to be trained for that, and it comes with experience. Especially most sports journalists grow up watching sports and having, oh, I can't wait to interview this guy. But when you're in front of their face and ready for an interview, it takes practice. Mm-hmm. And the second question that you mentioned a couple times already, and a lot of consistent listeners on this podcast would know, I'm very big on mentors and covering mentors.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get your opinion on how valuable mentors are, especially in the sports journalism field. Who are some of your mentors and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, mentors are super valuable because they give you so much inspiration, especially, and it's not just about being young. I'm in my mid to late 30s and I'm still talking to my mentors, right? I still check in with them and how they've helped me. And sometimes it's just asking a question, right? Or asking how you navigate something. Like I said earlier, Bob Windrum, who I call a mentor. I know Bob hired me to work at NetsDaily, but at the same time, Bob is a mentor because he's older and he's got a lot of experience working in investigative journalism. And he, I owe him a lot because when I came to sit down with him to talk about NetsDaily, and I remember that we met in the Starbucks, right in the Oculus at the Barclays Center. We actually met there. That was our first meeting. And I remember he actually saw my videos through Backpack Broadcasting that I had done, and I sent him some stuff. It's actually funny how mentors work. You guys just made me think about something by asking this question, Chris. My mentor, Jamoke Davis, the one I mentioned from college, he came to me and said to me, why aren't you talking to some of these SB Nation sites like NetsDaily, and I'm forgetting, what's the Knicks site? Orange and Blue Skies, I believe that's the name of their site.
I believe so.
Yeah, and he said to me, why aren't you talking to them about doing some video content? They don't have like a video journalist. And so I actually reached out to both, but I believe Orange and Blue Skies wasn't interested at the time. And Bob got back to me and we met, and Bob watched my videos that I've been doing these video reports for my own on Backpack Broadcasting. And he was like, look, I really like it. I think you're really good. And he believed in it and said, look, you could come in and he basically told me I could do whatever I wanted at NetsDaily and how the videos went. And, that belief, and, I always talk to Bob about things in journalism and watched about how he did things. But yeah, talking to him, and he gave me the advice to start Sideline Stories. And my mentor, Jamoke, he's the person that gave me the advice to start Backpack Broadcasting. And I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit too. But yeah, mentors are important. I still talk to the two of them. There's some other people who've been mentors off and on or give me advice indirectly when I saw a game. Stephen A. Smith is one of those people. People I talk to, like Howard Beck. Sometimes it's people who's not even in TV, but they're just in journalism. Howard Beck, Brian Lewis, who covered the Nets for the Post for a while. And I used to work at the Post, so I know that. George Willis. People who I just worked with, the colleagues that were just great mentors. Cord Stanley, somebody you guys might not know, but he used to work at News 12 and NBA TV, and he was a huge mentor to me when I first started, when I first got out of college. So I still talk to those people today. I don't really like using the term pick their brain, but I still like to check in on them or bounce ideas off of them or talk to them about different things in the industry because, there's also going to be rough days in the industry and you need those people to lean on sometimes to just help you navigate through certain things. So they're definitely valuable. No matter how old you get, they'll always be valuable to you.
I completely agree with that because mentors, especially, like we said a couple times already, experience is key in this field. And that kind of transitions into the NetsDaily work. Obviously, me and you both freelance at NetsDaily. Mm-hmm. Bob, I can't praise Bob enough. Me and you both know him. He's a great guy. He's got stories for days.
Yep.
But can you talk about your experience at NetsDaily? What were some of your favorite memories and kind of just your overall work there? So what were some of your takeaways from that?
Yeah, well, it was a fantastic time. I mean, I met Doug through NetsDaily, right? Like this
Josh
how
Barrage.
right? The thing I think, if I had to sum up my time, it was fantastic. Like, obviously, the people I worked with, from Tom Lorenzo to Bob, all the other writers there. For as I said, thanks to Bob for believing in me and giving me the opportunity. But the thing I think that always stands out to me is the fans, because the fans of Nets Daily, and they are loyal, diehard Nets fans.
Oh yeah.
And you got to remember, when I came on, this is 2013, so this is the first year in Brooklyn, right? And so I'm a Brooklynite, and all the excitement that was up with the Barclays Center and them coming. So it was a really exciting time to do that. But I'm so grateful how the fans of Nets Daily embraced me and how appreciative they were of the video content that it was out there, and the discussions and reports I would do with Tom. I think that's the thing that really was amazing to me, because I would talk with a lot of people on Twitter, whether it was Doug, Henry Sanchez, another person I'm thinking about some of these other fans I would talk to. And I got to meet a lot of these fans at games. And everybody who knows me knew if they saw me at a game or I was at a game, I'd stop and talk to everybody and ask them, hey, do you want to be part of this video? Do you want to talk about something with the Nets? And I try to really include the fans. And I think the fans really, they make the site. I think it still is like that today. They really make the site, and they're really interactive. And I think, Chris, I'm sure you know this as well too, and obviously, connecting with Doug, I think you just really realize how much connected you are to the fans. And sometimes I wish more people in media were like that, because not everybody's like that. But I always say, just like athletes, you're nothing without the people who watch you, who read you. So you always have to pay respect back to them. And, I'm never too busy, or, don't have the time to talk to somebody about something that's going on. Generally, we're talking basketball, right? So I have no problem talking basketball. But I think my biggest takeaway was just the fans really appreciated the videos, man. Like, they really appreciated the videos and the content. And to some degree, I miss doing that, because it's a small but intimate community. It's not really as small as people would think. It's the most read SB Nation site, but it really was a way to connect with fans that I hadn't experienced before. And from the jump, I remember when I made the Nets Daily video account on Twitter, and a whole bunch of people follow me, and the Brooklyn Nets even welcomed me into covering the team and all this stuff. And it was really great. It was just a great time, man. I had a lot of good time, seeing them in the playoffs, just seeing how the Barclays Center came alive. And yeah, man, it was just fun. It was a really fun time to cover the team. There was a lot of ups and downs, but it was fun. Absolutely fun.
Yeah, because you hit it on the nail right there. The fans are the ones that really make that site, because especially like what you just mentioned with fans, they're always whether they're commenting on the actual story you write, the actual product that you're producing, or whether it's just on Twitter in general. The Nets Daily fan base is very strong, and that's been built over the years. Because I remember when I had my eyes set on becoming a sports journalist, I remember you guys, Brian and Anthony, being at Media Day on the YouTube channel, doing the actual with the mics and everything. I remember watching those type of things and stuff. And obviously that content nowadays is kind of transformed to Matt Brooks's film studies, and it's kind of going that way. But I remember your work there, and it was excellent.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. I felt like I did good work, and I felt like I pushed it, and I still have great connections there. So, and still with the fans. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it was definitely an art that I still miss to this day, because sometimes I'm not the biggest reader. I'm more of a listener, even without visuals. So I do think it's something that fan content still needs and relies on. It's great to have the video breakdowns, but it's also different to have your own more personalized broadcasting team per se. Like you and Tom were like the OGs of that. So it was something special that we all needed. And something I got to ask, because I think I've teased it while you were with Nets Daily, being such a big Knicks fan and then covering like the other team and then hearing all the smack, and you're just like sitting there like, yep, just nodding your head, going through,
just taking it,
just being like that secret agent per se, or whatever you want to call it, turncoat. I don't know. Like, what was that like? So
the funny thing was, I remember when I met Bob and I told Bob I was a Knicks fan. He was like, the fans are going to have fun with that. And it was funny, as fans found out that I was a Knicks fan, kind of the way they found out Tom was like a Grizzlies fan. It was interesting, because then I would meet fans and they'd be like, yo, man, how are you a Knicks fan? Why? Like, does it bother you to cover the team? And I'm like, no, because I'm a journalist, right? And and at the end of the day, like I'm not one of the journalists that says I can't be a fan anymore. Or I've given up my fandom. I'm not that, because I think being a sports fan is what made us all love to do this, and I'm sure you would agree with me, Chris, on this. Yep. But it was interesting with fans, because I think a lot of fans expected me to be a Nets fan, and they were just really shocked when they found I was a Nets fan. And I think it was worse when they found I was a Knicks fan. And I understand why. Like, I get that. Like, I understand why. As a Knicks fan, I also say, I tell people all the time, like, I don't dislike the Nets. The Nets wear Brooklyn on their chest. I'm Brooklyn born and raised. I like to see anything representing Brooklyn do well. I like to see that happen. So, yeah, it was weird at the time, Doug, that people would come up to me and ask me all the time. And the thing they would ask me, they would say, I remember this one guy asked me, and I don't remember his name, but he was like, how could you be a Knicks fan? Like, he was so incredulous. Like, he couldn't understand why I was a Knicks fan. And, I explained it. A lot of people tried to get me to come over and ask me if I was ever going to jump ship. And, maybe I should think about that, because I'm not sure the Knicks have been so good for my health. But, no, yeah, it was interesting at the time. And I think, Doug, I don't remember when you met me, I don't remember if you asked me if I was a Net fan. I think you might have.
I think I found out like later on or something.
Okay.
It may have been like when I was maybe at Dodge Barrage, or like when I found out you were,
Oh, man, that.
Yeah, wow. Like you and Benito with Devin, running that team over there.
Yeah, that was a fun day. I got to look at that video. That's a fun day. That was fun.
No doubt. Yeah. But yeah, no, those were some great times. So what do you think? Something you just reminded me of, because you mentioned the Brooklyn on the chest. What do you think about the Nets potentially bringing back jersey, whether it's on their chest or just endorsing their history and not just making all black and white?
So I've seen you tweet about this, and I happen to agree with you, right? Like, I think to some degree they should acknowledge the jersey history, and for yourself, Doug, right? Like, you're like a lifelong Net fan.
Oh no, man, I'm Brooklyn, man. I didn't even watch.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I literally. I grew up like a Mets fan, and that was really it. And that was barely anything. Like, I'm a very bland, boring Mets fan. And then college comes around, and I see my friend who's a passionate Bulls fan, and I'm like, you know what? This is it. Junior year, I'm going to watch. And then I missed like the first few games of the season. And then the first game I watch is the Kevin Love game, where he has like a crazy double-double, wipes the floor with the Nets. I mean, I don't remember the score, but it felt like that. And that was my first season in Brooklyn. Like, my dad grew up a fan, like well into the ABA days. And then I remember hearing Jason Kidd on my TV, because I would have the biggest TV in our apartment for whatever reason in my room. I don't know. I was playing video games. But yeah, unlike Chris, who on the other hand, who's like, going from a fan to covering the team.
Right.
But, the way I talk, the way I present myself, it's hard to tell. But I mean,
no, it is.
I have no shame in it.
No, I get it. And I think, because when you go to Barclays Center, right, you'll still see, Jason's kids' jerseys hanging up there, and you'll even see, Julius Erving, and you still see the old Red Nets colors, the red, white, and blue, and that stuff around there. I would like it. I mean, at least they could wear the jersey on the throwback night. That would be nice. It'd be nice to have a night honoring the New Jersey side of the Nets, because of what I don't know for sure, Doug, and I do remember actually discussing this with Bob at some point. We had a discussion, was how much of the fan base that was in Jersey, that was like Jersey based, like someone like Chris, right, who grew up in Jersey, rooted for them as the New Jersey Nets. How much did a lot of that fan base still translate and say, hey, we're coming over to Brooklyn? Or were they kind of like, yo, like, screw this, like, that they don't represent Jersey anymore? And I would understand that. In the same way, I think this is why I'm intrigued to see where the Nets are in terms of their fandom in about 4 or 5 years. And the reason I say that is because, they started playing here in 2013 in Brooklyn. And by that time, you will have almost a generation of kids who grew up with the Nets in Brooklyn, right? And who could be Nets fans, or their parents took them to Nets games. So it's very different than my experience growing up as a Knicks fan, right? In Brooklyn.
It's very possible your daughter will be a Nets fan next,
She's I don't know if that's going to happen, but I did take her to a Nets preseason game against the Raptors. I think it was the last preseason game this year. I took her to that game. So she sees that. And here's what's great about my daughter. When she sees the Nets logo, she recognizes it immediately. She's like, "Oh, Brooklyn!" So she recognizes it immediately from that experience in that game.
I love that, regardless if it's about the team or not. Just like that, the Brooklyn passion. I love it. Yeah,
she recognizes it. So, no, man, I think they should. I think that I've seen you say it, and I do happen to agree with that. And I do think they should pay some homage to New Jersey and the roots in New Jersey, and even honestly the roots in Long Island too, right? Like I know they do that with the G League team, but it would be nice to do that. You can have a night for it. You can do some kind of giveaway with the colors or wear the throwback jersey. I think there's a way to do it, and I would like to see the Nets do it. I think it would be a nice touch to those jerseys.
It was great to finally see Dr. J in the building for a Nets game, and because before that it was just the big three. So this is the right step. They've been slowly taking out their alumni list and having more come through. So hopefully they add the color back into the banners after they took it away like a season or two ago.
Yeah.
Start like that. And then instead of these remix of jerseys, I mean, you can theoretically take all the old jerseys and make them black and white, but there's some jerseys that are perfect as they are. So.
Yeah, I hear you. I understand that.
Yeah, because as someone that's, like you guys said, grew up New Jersey Nets fan, literally I got tickets for less than what a hot dog cost in the arena at Izod. Like I know that spending $5 tickets, growing up watching Chris Douglas Roberts, Anthony Morrow, Devin Harris.
Tough times, man.
Tough times. Like those are tough. But getting back to Dexter's point, he's right, because I have a ton of friends that were Nets fans when they were in New Jersey, but they felt betrayed when they went to Brooklyn and became Knicks fans or became fans of other teams. And getting just my view on the kind of the jersey colors and the banners becoming New Jersey colors and stuff, I think it's a good direction taking it, New Jersey. But like Dexter said, a lot of the fans that are currently Brooklyn Nets fans are in Brooklyn. It's going to be interesting to see how it translates over the years to come. But like I said, especially with a lot of people in New Jersey being someone that lives here, grew up here and everything, it's all Knicks. And it's ironic because at least my time when I go to the city and go on like Ubers and stuff and talk to Uber drivers, have simple conversations, they always say too, especially with New York drivers, they say this is always going to be a Knicks town. And Dexter, do you believe in that? You think that the Knicks, say the Nets, how many do you think that there's a number of championships the Nets have to win in order to translate New York as a Nets town? Because in my opinion, I think it's always going to be a Knicks town.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the person to say I don't think anything could change, because let's say, I'm going to throw out something. Let's say in the next 15 years, the Nets win 3 championships and the Knicks win none. Well, then you could see a shift. And here's why. The reason why is, it goes to my point I was saying before, it's really about what younger generations see, and that's how you get like a huge shift. This isn't the Yankees and Mets, and I'm a Mets fan, right? But this isn't the Yankees and Mets where there's this huge disparity in championships. Now, there's an argument to be made the Knicks have 2 championships, and for most times they've been better than the Nets, but really in the last 20 years, you can't say that, right? So there's a whole generation of people. There's somebody who's like 20 years old. I forget how old you are, Chris, but there's somebody who's 20 years old who can literally say, for most of the life, the Knicks have not been run as good as the Nets. And that's a fact. That's a true statement, right? Just look at playoff appearances. Just look at wins. It's absolutely true. So they haven't really seen the Knicks win. So now if you take it to another level, right, and the Nets actually do win, and they win or surpass the amount of titles the Knicks have, well, then 15 years from now, you're looking at it very differently. I think it could be differently. Now, if things are the same, or the Knicks win a couple more titles and the Nets only win 1, or it's like 4-1, then it'll still be a Knicks town. Like, I think it'll be a Knicks town as long as they have more championships, right, among a certain period of time. But I think if that switches and the Knicks as an organization still aren't looking to be or appear to be well run, then and the Nets are competent and they win, because winning changes everything. If you win, then it could become a Nets town, or it definitely could become that. I'm not the person to say nothing can change. It can definitely change real quick.
I agree with that. And off the top of your head, if you had to take a guess right now, do you think the Nets win a championship in the KD Kyrie era or no?
Oh, somebody asked me that recently, and I think my gut would say, I said no. Mm-hmm. And if you put it off the top of my head, I say no. But what I will say to that, to explain it, is I think a lot of it depends on two things for me that are really big. One is how good KD is when he comes back. I'm actually not as worried about KD. I think he'll probably be fine, even if he's 85, 90% of himself. The two things that probably concern me more are, well, one of the things that needs to be answered pretty soon, which is like who's going to coach this team. And then the other thing is Karis LeVert. I like Karis a lot, but I'm concerned about his health and the issues he's had, and he's got to be healthy. And is he going to be the third star, or are the Nets going to trade for a third star? Those are the key things to really asking me. As currently constituted, with a lot of question marks, I'd have to say no right now. But who knows? You don't know. A lot can change.
Yeah, because I agree with that. Because when people ask me that all the time, do you think the Nets are going to win a championship, right? I feel like with the team that they have right now and the questions that are raising, especially the health questions, because those are the biggest ones, like you said, with LeVert, KD coming back, whatever the case is, I feel like their roster needs to be have a little more foundation to it, a couple more pieces. Like you said, are they going to get a third star? What's the head coach? Who's the next head coach going to be like? All those questions are going to be raised. And I think at the end of the day, the safe answer you could say is, hey, they are a contender. But you can't say, hey, I expect them to win X amount of rings, whether it's 1 to 3.
I'd be stunned if they weren't contenders. Like, that would shock me. Like, if KD's healthy with him and Kyrie and the depth that they look to have right now, I'd be shocked if they weren't. I think it'll be some growing pains with them coming back, but whether it's a following season, it would be shocked if they weren't a top 4 team in the East. That would stun me if they weren't, because they just have too much talent. But I do think it's going to be an adjustment period with KD and Kyrie. And the thing is, they both have to be healthy. That's the key. They both have to be healthy, and they need a little bit more out of LeVert. I think that's really the big key.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
and the same thing you mentioned about LeVert's health and all that kind of thing. Same can go with Kyrie as well. And the other thing I realize is that the Nets switched up how their offense works when it's not just about the system and players play to their strength. You have products like D'Angelo or these crazy Karis games. So I'm curious with the next coach, how loose will they be or how strict will they be with their system? So I think that's something we got to look forward to whenever the NBA gets back, but we'll touch upon that little tidbit later.
Yep.
So switching gears a little bit with Backpack Broadcasting, you also co-host to the Ain't Hard to Tell podcast. So I know we talked about this a little bit off air, but in your opinion, what do you think podcasts are? Why do you think podcasts are becoming a popular trend, and what are some successful tips?
Yeah, it's crazy because since this whole COVID-19 pandemic, right? Like I read something the other day about like sales in podcasting is like increased by crazy amount. Like people are spending more on podcasting equipment more than like ever before. I think it's, the market of it has become a little bit oversaturated, but the thing I like about podcasting is it's this really great space for people to put their own personality and how they want to talk about whatever they want to talk about, right? So whether it's sports, no matter what it is, you can do it. And there's an audience for everybody, right? Like there's a unique audience out there and you can really tap into it. And I think that's what's great about media, period, right now at this point. You can find your unique audience. You can do it yourself like you guys are doing. And I'm a big supporter of that. And that's why I'm excited about podcasting in the future, because it kind of ties into what I've done with Backpack Broadcasting and starting my own podcast and that stuff too, which was, sometimes you got to do this stuff independently to get where you want. And there's no better cheerleader or pusher than yourself, to get your content out and do it the way you want. So I'm all for it, man, because like I said, there's an audience for everything and everybody. It's just about learning how to tap into that market and, getting guests that suit your podcast and using social media right to push your podcast. And there's just so many tools, but I think it's a good thing. I know some people look at it as a negative. It's a lot of people being in a space. It is oversaturated to some degree, but I think you just have to think about what makes you stand out and just be you and do what you do. And the rest will take care of itself.
Yeah, no doubt. And what is it like working with Brian?
Brian is a ball of energy. I think he actually just texted me about something right now. He always texts me about something or some idea. No, Brian's fun. I think what makes our podcast, I'll be clear about our podcast. That was Brian's idea. Like Brian came to me and wanted to do the podcast. I wasn't thinking about doing a podcast. Brian came to me about doing it and thought it was a really good idea and also came up with the name. And it's just fun working with him. I think we have a lot of fun. I think what's great about what we do is because we have a gap in our age. So I'm a little older, so it's kind of like big brother, little brother. I think it's fun because we just have different perspectives sometimes on things that come to it, or from different places. But we just have so much fun with it. We've been doing it almost 3 years. It's crazy to think about that now, which shows you with podcasting, you just have to stick with it. But it's fun. He'll think of guest ideas. We try to push the show and do more things that we can do. And so that's been the fun part about it. But he's fun. Brian's a ball of energy. He's opinionated. He can get super excited about some stuff that I'm not super excited about, like wrestling. But no, man, he's great. He's so fun to work with, man. And it's just like it's a lot of the joy is kind of like when we just talk about the ideas for the podcast and then plan and execute it. Some of the best conversations we might actually not occur on the podcast. So we might have to try to do something about that to get that on the podcast.
Yeah, no. And the other thing I like is all the laugh tracks we have going. Like something is really he just laughs at himself sometimes, and it's just phenomenal. And that ball of energy you're talking about literally just rolls on itself. So like, and a lot of the diversity of the guests you have is phenomenal. Like that's what so great about you guys is that all walks of life. And it can have one thing in common. It's just phenomenal. So I love that energy, the diversity. It just brings everyone together, and that's what we need.
Thank you. I mean, I think that's something we talked about or tried to be mindful of in doing. I think just as you go further in it, it's not at the forefront, but we wanted it to be diverse. We wanted to have different kinds of people. We wanted to think about are we bringing enough women into the space to talk on certain things? Because sometimes that doesn't happen on certain sports podcasts. And are we bringing in different people from all different backgrounds, whether it's somebody who we view as super accomplished, right? Or we would have a writer, it doesn't matter the level, right, of where you are. So like Chris is welcome on our podcast, right? Even though Chris is starting out and just graduated college, like it doesn't matter if we think that, you have something interesting to say and you're talented at what you do, you come and hang with us. That's kind of really how we roll on it. It's not really all about the name, although we've had some high profile names, but it's just kind of really
not to brag.
Yeah, but we've had a few, but no, it's kind of really just about like, what does this person bring to the table? Do we like their energy? And we just work off of that. And I think we keep that in mind, and we try to be diverse. And I think it's fun. I think it's fun when we choose guests and we pull guests. And one thing I'll say is a lot of the guests come from just my experiences in travels and journalism, and Brian's as well too, and just people we've connected with. And we're just grateful for all the people that came on to talk. And that's why I try to go on when people ask me to come on, like you guys. I try to, come on to and talk, because I know how hard it is to produce the content and find guests. So getting people to talk and people you like talking to, it helps, that definitely helps a lot.
Sure.
This podcast episode is brought to you by Anchor. Anchor is an app that allows podcast producers to record and create original content. It is free to record and create a podcast, giving producers the ability to easily edit their material off their phone or computer. Anchor allows producers and talent to make money off their work with no minimum listenership. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you on platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and many more. To get started, Anchor app or go to anchor.fm. Anchor for Doug and I has been great and allows us to bring unique, creative, and opinionated content to listeners of the Wingspan Podcast.
Yeah, and then I wanted to get your opinion on this, Dexter, as well, because as someone who's been involved and been around sports media and journalism field for more than almost a decade, where do you think the field is heading in terms of content and platforms? Like you've seen, like you mentioned earlier in the podcast with the newspapers and stuff. A lot of people, I'm a big fan of newspapers. I drive over the next town over to the stationery store and pick up the Daily News or New York Post whenever I get the chance.
Really?
But wow. Yeah, I'm one of those very rare categories of people in my age gap as a 22-year-old that would like to just have a physical newspaper copy in front of my hand. But now you see all these days, especially like NetsDaily, for example, online publication where people can tune in on their phones, laptops, kind of access it wherever you go. Where do you kind of see the field heading in terms of like that content and what it's produced on the certain platforms?
Yeah, no, it's actually a fantastic question, and I think you are you definitely are an anomaly in terms of wanting a newspaper. And it's funny because I told you guys how I used to buy a newspaper every day in school, right? And I don't remember the last time I purchased a newspaper. It's easily over 10 years, if not more, since I've held a physical newspaper, but I haven't actually purchased one. I think where things are going, and I think that one of the keys with journalism, a little bit of advice I would give is I think you have to be ready that things can change, right? Because the game's a lot different than when I graduated college in 2005 to where it is today, right? It's completely different, and things have exploded more online, and social media exploded. But it's funny. I think we're sort of primed for another shift, so to say. And I think the shift is going to come a lot more so in really people taking control of their own content and it opening up the eyes of some other bigger brands. And the reason I say that shift is kind of right now is because of what's going on in the world with the COVID-19 pandemic. It's forced a lot more people to adjust in terms of media content, right? You even see these big media companies doing it. So everybody's Skyping or Zooming calls for content, or that's how they do their interviews. I'm doing that for work right now. So I think a lot of people are going to look at things and say, okay, this is how I could do things more. I can make a home studio. I can have this kind of setup. I have to think more outside of the box. I might be able to turn content quicker than I did before. We kind of always been moving to that, Chris. We've kind of been moving to this. We're in this age of instant gratification in terms of news, right? We could turn things really quick. Nobody wants to wait to go pick up the newspaper. Everybody wants to hop online and see what somebody tweeted or what NetsDaily put out or whatever. But I do think it's going to be more of a shift. I think in terms of video, you're going to definitely see more people doing stuff from home remotely. I think that's going to shift. I think that's going to shift how we work. My concern, though, is I do have a concern. One of my concerns is industries, and this is journalism doesn't separate itself from this, but they tend to always try to do more with less, right? And so a lot of jobs start turning into one person does it. So if this is just an example, Chris, you're a writer and you're also editing your own stuff, where something suffers there, right? And so you don't necessarily, people will lose jobs, and you don't necessarily have the same amount of eyes on a project or amount of people doing what I think they should be doing. My concern is that we will sacrifice quality for quantity, which I don't want to happen. I think it's sort of already been happening, but I think there has to be a point where we have to say, hey, this is good quality. We still need great writers. We still need great broadcasters. I think there always will be a need for that, but I think there should be quality, definitely. But I think it's a great time because I think we're more connected than ever before through things like the internet and podcasting and all these different things. So I think you're actually going to see a lot of great collaborations come out of this time, and a lot of good ideas sparked out of this time. I think when things seem tough, a lot of great creativity sparks in the world, and I think we'll see that. So I think this may inspire a lot of people, and there's younger journalists than even you, Chris, right now, that are looking at some of the stuff that people are doing, or looking at the podcasts that people are doing, and they're saying, why not me? Why can't I get in the game? And I think that's actually pretty dope, man. I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, because you hit it right there. And that was going to be my follow-up to that about people with jobs especially looking for employees and future employees to cover more than one thing. Because back in the day, and I've talked to people about this, like Philip Bondi and a couple other guys that have been in the field for a while, it's those times of being known as, okay, you are a strict reporter, you get the news out, you're known for that. It's kind of your niche. But nowadays, employers, like you said, the quality level is kind of decreasing because they want their employees to do more than just the one thing. Along being a reporter, like you said, they want people to know how to do Premiere, Avid, certain editing software, be experts in that, Photoshop, you name it. Because that was going to be my next cue is, do you think that is a smart approach with companies looking into their employees? Because obviously, hey, I get their side and I get both sides of it. Companies want their employees to know more than one thing, because if they need certain things, they could go to one person and say, hey, we know you could do this. We know you could cover it. Get going on it. But do you think those kind of being known as kind of a reporter. Hey, this guy's a good reporter. He knows how to this. He makes a video, send it to this guy for the edits. Do you think that's a disadvantage at all, or do you think that's kind of a what side do you think that is? I know you covered that briefly.
Yeah, I mean, to one point of that, I'll say I think the days of that are gone. Right? Like it sucks, but it's gone. Like I find out a lot of times some people don't even realize that AccuWeather, I produce, edit, shoot all my own stories right now. And I mean, that's a lot. Like, and there are things that you lose in that aspect, but I also, like you said, understand where businesses are going with that, which is why, to that point, Chris, another thing I would recommend to anybody listening to this podcast that's trying to get into the journalism field, and to yourself, is you can't think about it as just being a writer anymore, or you can't think about it as just being a broadcaster, reporter on camera anymore. You have to be multifaceted. You have to be multi-talented, because he or she who is multi-talented is going to open yourself up for more job opportunities. It's kind of the good thing about when I came out of school, because I came out of school when there was a shift kind of going with more stuff digitally. And I think it showed me that I needed to be multi-talented. I needed to do as much as possible, something Brian and I talk about all the time too. So in a way, it's that you always have to look at what the industry is, and then you have to react to that, right? And you have to think, how can I do this and survive in this industry while also pushing it forward? So if you're just trying to come into the game and be like, hey man, I just want to be a reporter, and I just want to be the Nets beat reporter or whatever beat reporter, nah, man. Not saying that beat reporters won't exist, because I think they should exist. But what I'm saying is there's only so many limited slots for that, right? And
exactly.
If you want that, that's cool. Like, I'm not knocking anybody who wants that. Like, if you want to be a beat reporter, it's great. All the beat reporters I've worked with in life, I love them. A lot of great people. But at the same time, if you're trying to come into this game and write, you need to be as versatile as possible, right? So, and that means sometimes taking the necessary and appropriate steps that you need to learn as much as you can. So, Chris, if you're at a Long Island Nets game, and if you can take your phone and you can shoot yourself doing a quick recap of something just to get reps and skills in front of the camera, it's going to make you a better quote unquote multimedia journalist, right? So
exactly.
If you're looking for a job and someone says, hey, because this is what it comes down to for writers nowadays, you have to be able to, if they want a video with it, you have to be able to talk about something. The job isn't just writing anymore, right? It's actually being able to present something that they can put on digital for their audiences to see. And can you speak eloquently, and can you deliver a message and recap what happened? And I actually am encouraged, though, because I think a lot of younger people coming into the game of journalism, sports journalism, I think their schools are teaching them this. They're well more versed in it. They understand that's kind of the need of what they have to do. And they're actually much better equipped than when I came into journalism. For a lot of people who were trying to write, if they told them to be on camera, they were like, oh, no, I can't do that, or I don't know how to do that. And so, yeah, does it suck? Would it be nice if you could just focus on one thing at your job? Would you probably be better at that job? Yes, I believe that. But that's just not what the game is right now, and I don't see it really going back, right? So you have to adjust, and you have to make yourself as multifaceted, as talented as possible. That's to me, it's the only way you survive, honestly.
Yeah, because I could agree with that, because as someone who's graduating college, and throughout my 4 years, when I started, I became a communications major when I was a sophomore. And at that time, I was like, when I was, like I was mentioning before, just picking up newspapers, always being an avid sports reader, I was like, hey, I want to do that. And that's where most people's inspirations come from when they want to pursue a future career. But one thing I pride Montclair is that they didn't just limit me to that. Back then, obviously, like I mentioned, when you go into the real world, you learn new things. Obviously, you learn new things about the field. And with Montclair, what they did is, even though my major is sports media and journalism, they put sports media in there because they taught me how to work with certain cameras, the editing features, and that kind of stuff. Back then, when I was a sophomore, I was like, this is not what I want to do. Why am I being taught this? But my dad even said, he goes, trust me, you're going to want to learn this. The industry's changing. You're doing stuff. And I pride Montclair on that. So I could agree with you on that. And like I said, all these companies, they want people that could do more. And for anyone, that's why I started a YouTube channel. That's why I started this podcast with Doug, is because you want to branch out. Because even when you experiment with new things, you don't know if you're going to find that passion for it and say, hey, you know what? I actually like this. I'm going to pursue this and stuff. So I preach exactly what you just said.
Yeah, but you tried, right? And the hardest thing I think is jumping into or doing anything new that's unfamiliar. But shout out to your dad for seeing that, the light on that, because, and your school for doing the same thing as well, because you're not truly preparing the next generation of journalists and sports journalists if you don't tell them to be multidimensional as possible. You're actually doing them a huge disservice. So that's the thing. And I hope if somebody takes anything about this part where we're talking about the industry, is that, try to learn as much as you can. And to some degree, there will be no better learning than jumping, quote, into the fire yourself, right? And so just starting a podcast or starting a YouTube channel. Like, look, when I started Backpack Broadcasting, man, I had some videos that, quote unquote, bombed, right? Like they didn't have a lot of views, but I went out there and I kept reporting on high school games and I got the reps. And that's kind of what matters. It's just like working out or changing your body, right? Your brain is a muscle. Your mind is a muscle. You want to work it out. So every time you're doing something, every time you guys do a podcast, you're getting better. You're getting sharper. You're sharpening that sword. And you just got to keep at it, man. And you're going to get stronger. But if you just focus on one thing, it's good. Don't get me wrong. It's good because you want to master that craft, but you're not being as attractive to job opportunities as you could be in today's climate.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
So Dex, just switching gears one last time back to the NBA.
Sure. Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on the NBA looking into reviving their season? Do you think it's possible? What are your opinions on that?
So I'm really skeptical about anything involving sports returning too soon. I want these leagues to, including the NBA, I want them to listen to the experts, the medical experts. That's what I've been trying to do in all this stuff, and take the appropriate steps. Now, I listened to a podcast the other day that had some epidemiologists on, and Brian and I are hoping to do the same thing soon to try to talk to somebody about this on our podcast, an expert. And they were saying, like, look, there's ways this can happen. Some people are in favor of the biodome method, right? Where you keep everybody in one place, right? Like you've been talking about with Disney World and other stuff. And some people are kind of in the favor of maybe you take a couple of cities and you move the teams around from a bit and you have daily testing, right? What I will say is no matter what you do, I can see how the biodome situation, and from what I've heard from the experts, makes me a little bit shaky, because if you keep everybody in this place and then like somebody gets infected and then it spreads, it could be a disaster. If you have it in like 4 separate cities and you're moving the teams around between these cities to play these games and you have daily testing, I think there's a bit of a way to control it more and isolate if somebody does contract COVID-19. Look, whatever it is, we got to be safe. Whatever it's going to be, there isn't going to be fans for a while. I think that's pretty clear. I don't think we're going to see sports with fans for a while, which makes me sad, right? Because, Chris, you want to go to games as media, and it might be weird if you don't see any fans. You can't even see Doug at the game anymore, right? Like, that's kind of weird. But obviously, I think we have to be safe. I think it has to be slow. I think there has to be testing. That's the most important thing to me. Like, is the NBA going to have testing? Because it's not just the players. I think people forget it's coaching staffs. It's all the people that work around the teams. And I'm sure that'll be reduced a bit. It's the security that we see at places like the Barclays Center. It's the coaches. Sometimes coaches, we got to forget, coaches are older and who knows, they might have pre-existing health conditions. They may be more susceptible to this. So whatever they do, it's got to be with testing, and it can't be rushed. I love the NBA. I miss basketball. But, I do care about the health and well-being of all of, our fellow men and women out there, whether they play sports or not. And so, I think we have to do this right. And if that means us missing sports a little bit longer, I'm okay with that. But we have to do it the right way. I think if they have testing as we move closer towards getting a vaccine, I think things will be okay. But whatever they do, just to reiterate, got to be a lot of testing. It probably is going to have to be daily. And, we just got to be safe on this, man. Got to be.
Yeah, no, Chris and I definitely agree in that aspect. Like, I would love closure so much because there are some teams that, like, this could be their only window.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, in terms of for the teams, I do want them to get the closure. Like, I would like to see there be a champion. I would like to see that, right? Like, and we were just coming towards the playoffs, and you're getting excited about that, and so I would like to see that. I think the NBA will be focused on getting that done. The other concern I have, guys, is I wonder if they let's say, I don't know, let's say they're able to somehow finish the season in September. Right, and then they do the playoffs, and then well, what's that going to look like? Are we going to have a short off season, and we're going to start the season on Christmas, which I'm kind of a fan of the NBA doing.
That's not
fun. It just might be such a short turnaround before we go into the next season. But you know what? That's so far off. I can't even think about that. I guess we just have to figure out, can we have games, and how can we do that?
That is the scheduling domino is one of the biggest ones. Like, how far until they call it quits, and is it going to be like an end season with no end? I really would hate for them just to pick out of the team with the highest record. One idea I thought of that could be safer is if shrink the playoffs, just one goes straight to the playoffs, giving enough time to rest, and do maybe the top 4 teams play. I mean, because that way it's most of the time, not all the time, those are the teams that usually get to the conference finals and get to the finals. That way it's limiting, people to, start the blender all over again, per se. I mean, yeah, it would be cool, like the KD and Kyrie thing, which is a crazy storyline. But, like, you know what? It's not worth it at the end of the day. So if there is a way to play, and this is like the last resort, you have 4 fortunately, what the rankings are at the moment, top 4 teams, like, they play, and whatever happens, happens. Yeah, there's always going to be an asterisk. Regardless, there'll be an asterisk symbol, in my opinion. But then, yeah, like you said, like, what happens if everything gets pushed back further, and then, we end up not having a Christmas start kind of thing? Like, how much further does the domino effect keep going for following seasons? And the other thing that's been brought up a lot lately, Bobby Marks brought up, was financial aspect. Like, if they don't play, that's a lot of lost money, and that, like, for teams that have paid their stars so big, they're screwed.
But the key thing with that money, right, is it's all about the TV dollars, and I think that's why the NBA and NHL kind of in that realm too, and all the sports, Major League Baseball, NFL, they're going to be motivated to get this happening, is because they at least want to, I think, get it to a point where they can broadcast it to fans, because there's so much money in that, and for these networks to fill up the time and the sponsorship, and like you said, Doug, what they're paying the players. So there's so much money involved in this. I understand all that. It's just, I want to make sure they can do it right and safe. That's really my main concern here.
Yeah, because like Doug said, and Dexter, you hit it on the point as well. The main focus here is the testing. That's the main focus. If they can get the testing, okay, then that helps out. But another issue, and Dexter, this is something I want to get. Same thing with you, Doug. I want to get your opinion on. I don't know if you guys saw what Blake Snell, the Rays pitcher, said, but he even was like, if the contracts go down, they're not going to pay us as much. The games are more like consistent. I'm not going to play. That's what most athletes are saying. And I could see both sides of this, being from my reporter side, my career side, and a fan side, right? Is a lot of people, the public sees it as these guys, athletes, no matter they're making 5, 10, 15 million, they're overpaid to play sports. That's usually what a lot of athletes say or mostly fans say, when you think of the public perception of this whole coronavirus and what's going on in sports, that, hey, they could take a pay cut to play. Now, if you look at it this way, like you said with the testing, is how consistent is this going to be? Because if you look at the NBA, for example, the NBA, unlike the MLB and other sport, contact is key in basketball. You can't play basketball feet apart from each other. I'm not stealing that from the governor, but I know that's a popular quote. But baseball, on the other hand, like, yeah, you're distance away. I get that point of it, but when I kind of say this, Dexter, is when you think of athletes, right, and they say, hey, I'm not playing if I'm getting paid less, what's the first thing that goes in your mind? Same thing with you, Doug. What's like the first thing you hear when you hear that?
For me, the first thing goes in my mind is like, I understand that. If my job came to me tomorrow with a pay cut, I could see, or anybody, I can understand how they could say, I don't know if I want to do that. I think we have to stop looking at athletes and thinking that It's just not saying that you guys are saying this, right? But you kind of hit on the nail on the head, Chris, with this, that there's the fan perception that these guys are overpaid to play a kid's game, right? And that's all because of supply and demand that's pushed it to that. These are some of the most talented people at what they do in the world. And I think they have a right to, everybody, and no matter what you do as a job, if your pay is reduced, I don't think everybody's going to sit there and say, hey, well, I'm still grateful to have a job. In some situations, yes, right? But in other situations, no, somebody might not be like that, or somebody else might have the same attitude that Chris Snell does and says, I'm not working for that. This isn't the contract I signed. Now, to some degree, I would say there has to be an adjustment to the times, and you probably have to be realistic and look at it for what it is and say, well, if everybody's losing money, then that's fine. I think if everybody takes the same reduction, then it's like, that's kind of fair if it has to come to that for a business to survive. I understand that. It's not like you're getting laid off, but I do understand why somebody might not want to take a pay cut, because I'm not necessarily sure, and I can't say this with certainty, I'm not sure the billionaire owners that run these teams, if they're actually taking a pay cut. Like, they're hurting for money, but like, how do we know how much they're taking out of their pocket? I think that's actually a fair question.
Yeah, no, it's definitely very interesting because like the idea of contract restructuring, it's more likely in other sports that's happened prior to stuff like this. But in the NBA, you don't really think about it. Like, they've already earned this money. And yeah, I do feel some leagues are overpaid, especially compared to others, where it's like, why are they paid so much like an average person when they're literally putting their body on the line at times, like some other leagues, they're getting so underpaid in comparison. But like, they've already earned this money and you can't really go back, because then what's going to happen? But I do understand the contrary to that, as I mentioned before. Like, if let's say you're losing 30 million cap, like that's a max player. And if you've already paid like 2 players that amount, the flexibility with the roster and winning, that's like I mean, I'm not a capologist at all, but that's something to
right.
It's, I don't know how to even describe my feelings about that, but like, it's going to make you throw out the book. I mean, I know they're going to have to do a new CBA and all that kind of thing, but some players that are expecting this amount of money and they probably earned it, like, they may not get that the next upcoming X amount of free agencies and that kind of thing. So I don't know what your thoughts on that is, but it's going to be interesting.
It's tough, man. It's tough. It sucks for the business owners. It sucks for the players that thought they were going to get a certain amount of money. I just hope at some point, and maybe I think the NBA probably will be headed to a new collective bargaining agreement. Maybe, or I know they just extended the time where they could talk to renegotiate it, but I think it's going to have to come to some sort of discussion, because everybody's hurt economically by this, right? Like, even media companies are hurt economically by this, and nobody knows whether their jobs or their salaries are safe. So I understand where there's somewhat of an eye roll from the public, and they're like, look, I could lose my job tomorrow. You might still have a job. You're just being asked to reduce your salary. However, I also understand the people who like, look, this is the contract I signed. This is what I earned. What if you don't know if you're going to get to free agency again, as you kind of mentioned, Doug, if you have that even left? The person's looking at it and say, I want my money. And I understand that. I understand that part of it too. I do.
Yeah. It's at what point do you like, you have your millions, but at what point does it like really affect everything else? Like, if you're not, you're going to be strongholded to like switch up what your contract is, which is very unfortunate. But switching to a slightly more positive, I mean, not for the Knicks, but positive topic. What are your thoughts on The Last Dance, and what are some of your favorite memories of Jordan and that finals Bulls team?
Yeah, so The Last Dance has been, I've loved it. It's great. I'm a fan of a lot of sports documentaries. Obviously, as a Knicks fan growing up, I didn't really have a lot of love for Michael Jordan or the Bulls. And as people have seen in that documentary, they broke the hearts of the Knicks quite a few times. So, but like, no, man, it's been fantastic. I think the insight into Jordan's mind, I thought it was, I really found one of my favorite moments, I think, thus far, and it has been Jordan when he was laughing at Peyton. That thing has become pretty much a meme around everywhere. I'm just laughing about him if he could guard him. I think seeing how intense Jordan was in practice, some of the little behind the scene things that I necessarily didn't know, like even about that Steve Kerr and Jordan fight, Pippen, how like ridiculously underpaid he was. I always knew he was underpaid, but I think I was too young to understand like how badly he was underpaid then at that point. And they covered that in the first couple of episodes. There's been a lot of really good things and like really good moments in this. That's just like fantastic. They've done a really good job with it. So yeah, they just so much good footage they had, and it's a great thing they did at that time. About it.
Production's been late in the game, which is
Yeah.
crazy.
Well, it's funny. I'll tell you guys this. This is back in 2010. I used to work as a video, and I don't think I mentioned this job, but I worked on camera for the New York Giants as a video journalist for the team for some time. And some of the people that ran the video department of the Giants used to work at the NBA and also with this other company I used to do some work with. And so they had actually told me, this is back in 2010, about that the NBA had all this footage of Jordan from his last season and the Dream Team stuff from the Dream Team doc NBA TV had a couple years ago. So they told me about this and that they were just trying to find a way to put it out down the road. So I remember them saying, hey, there's all this great footage and stuff you wouldn't even believe and all this stuff. And so, yeah, man, like to see that, even when I knew about it, so almost 10 years ago. Yeah, it's fantastic the way they put it together. And I'm really glad everybody's got to enjoy it. And basketball fans of all ages have been able to enjoy it, especially people who didn't get to see Jordan play at all. I think it's great that they get to see.
Exactly. Like I wasn't even a basketball fan back then. And it still means so much to me to learn about the quote unquote 48 hours type thing,
Right.
The first real load management. The soundtrack's been phenomenal.
Oh yeah. Fantastic.
The new memes, the Isaiah Thomas Zeke thing is so interesting. The worm. But something else that's been interesting that I guess we haven't really asked, at least Chris and I guess in the last episode or two, what do you think about the chronological order of things? Like it's like Pulp Fiction-esque.
Mm-hmm. But see, Pulp Fiction is one of my favorite movies, so I love it, right? Like I love the going from 98 and then going back to an earlier year, and the way they're kind of weaving it and tying it everything together is actually really good. It's really good storytelling in a different way that I've really enjoyed. I could see how some people maybe won't like it, but me personally, I've loved it. I thought it's been seamless. It flows well. It gives you a good perspective about Jordan in his earlier years, or why he was maybe this way in the later years post his first retirement. So getting to see that, I think it's actually been a really good choice in how they chose to tell the story. It's not a way I thought they would have gone going into this documentary, but I've really actually enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed the way they chose to tell the story.
Yeah, because it's interesting. Because as someone who was born in 1998, that order plays a lot. It's very impactful because a lot of my friends are obviously my age, and we didn't get to see Jordan, nor we were born to even have the ability to see Jordan, right? So having that order of the flashbacks, giving content to what happened behind the scenes, is, especially to get a little off topic, is a lot of kids my age always say LeBron is the GOAT, right? He's the greatest of all time. That's it. And see it this way. I always ask them a follow-up question after like an episode 2 of The Last Dance or whatever the case. I'm like, hey, what's your opinion now? And they're like, oh, wow, I didn't know a lot about what this documentary has covered from just reading and everything. Because kids my age, we knew about Jordan. We learned about Jordan not only through the shoes, but we learned from YouTube highlights, articles here and there, or even older guys that are in the media that got to cover him. And that's what makes this documentary so impactful. Like Dexter, you said, this documentary appeals to all age groups. And that's because it informs everyone. The older generation that covered Michael Jordan are finding out stuff that they didn't find about when he was playing or when they were reporting. Meanwhile, there's kids my age that are learning about this, seeing how, wow, this is what Jordan actually meant, not on the court, but just off the court in general, how he worked himself, how he portrayed himself to the media in all different aspects. So that's why I think this documentary is very good. And another point I wanted to hit as well was with this documentary too, people, it's not just focused on Jordan, right? Because we could all agree that when they started to promote this documentary, it was highlighted as, hey, this is its final season of Michael Jordan and the Bulls, and that's what it's going to be. But having the flashbacks, having the context behind everything, mostly it's covering the whole entire dynasty if you look at it in a big picture. Yep. And the big thing about that is, like I said already, is it gives kids my age, kids lower especially, that are getting into basketball to really realize, one, how different the game is, two, how important Jordan was to the NBA as a brand and as a player, and three is mostly seeing, wow, this guy really, this is why people call him the GOAT for younger generations. That's how kind of I see it.
Yeah, I think it's, I think as you get older, you kind of realize that, and someday your generation will be saying this about LeBron, right? Like you you kind of had to be there to experience it. So when people didn't see it, this is the closest thing you can get. Because like you said, Chris, YouTube highlights, you can see that, but it doesn't do it for you. It doesn't tell you the story. You don't know the nuances. You don't know the impact. Like, even for me, because of my age, I kind of missed that late 80s Jordan, like him coming into the league. So I don't even know. That's the first couple of parts where they were showing stuff like that. That probably has been a more interesting stuff, because a lot of the other stuff that happens, I would say 92 on, I kind of knew. The only thing is I was looking at it through a childlike lens. So sometimes it's really good for that refresher. But some of the early stuff that I was way too young to know about was cool to see, like just how impactful it was, how impactful the Air Jordans were when they came out. Like, I kind of grew up in the age of like, yeah, these were the shoes, these were the kicks that you got. But seeing how impactful it was when it hit the scene, for people, maybe adults at that time in the 80s, I'm sure it's just great. So I think the documentary does a good job of showing you that, or making you feel as though you're watching it through that time. And I think that's what's important, to connect people to different eras of things, and they can all learn. And, some people, I'm most intrigued in talking about this documentary with younger people who didn't watch Jordan play. That's who I find most interesting in talking to the documentary about, because I think for people of my age, even though we were kids/teenagers at this time, we kind of understood a lot of his impact, but really seeing the people who didn't see him play talk about his impact. And when they respect it and they acknowledge it, like, yo, man, like, this dude was the truth. Even if they feel LeBron is better, because I don't really care to get as much into that debate, but the fact that they can respect his body of work, that's cool, man. Like, that's really cool.
Yeah, and then two things I wanted to ask as my last two questions is, was it surprising to you that the character in Space Jam is pretty much Krause?
No,
I can't unsee it now. So.
What's funny is I can't unsee it now either. Obviously, at the time watching that movie as a kid, I didn't think about it, but it shows you how much of a disdain Michael Jordan has had for Jerry Krause. And it sucks, because when I watch this, I think the one thing the documentary does, and I forgot who said this in our podcast talking about it. It actually was Lance Meadow. He was on our podcast, and he said that the documentary sometimes doesn't highlight how good of a GM Jerry Krause was. And to some degree, I do think that's true. Like, Jerry Krause put this team together. Jerry Krause drafted Scottie Pippen. But, he was not beloved by the players at all. And he's this short, portly dude who, like, gets clowned on by Jordan all the time. And the players don't really seem to respect him. So, yeah, man. And then he became a monster. So, yeah, it's sad, too, because, like, Jerry Krause wasn't really able to be part of this doc, obviously because he passed away. So that, he's really doesn't have much of a strong current voice in this doc. You have some other stuff that is shot with him, but it would have been nice to hear him talking now, or if he was living, about that. That would have been, or how he felt. Did he realize that? Because that's what I'd like to know. Like, did Jerry Krause ever have a moment, Doug, where he looked at the movie and was like, oh, that's me? Because I'm sure
that is a very interesting question.
Yeah, because I'm sure that didn't feel good. Like, that couldn't feel good at all.
No, because it's a very grotesque creature.
Yes.
So basically this kind of transitions well, but did Jordan go too far with his leadership? A lot of people say, he was a bully, or, it's, you got to do what you got to do to win. So how do you see it? Because some people, me personally, I'll look back if that was me and I'll be like, you know what? It was the worst time of my life, but look where it got me. Like, good memories kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think you kind of get that from, like, Judd Bushler, Bill Wennington, when those guys spoke in it. I think it was Judd Bushler was like, he's an asshole, right? But I know they wouldn't trade any of the rings that they got. Now, I believe, personally, guys, in treating people the best you can, right? Always coming with respect and dignity, and that's kind of how I live my life. I've also played sports, and I understand that there are certain ways certain people, whether it's coaches, players, are going to motivate people. And I think you have to know your team. And I think Jordan, I think Kobe, rest in peace, had a little bit of this in him too, is they were so good at what they did that I think they look at other people, even other basketball players, and on their team, and they're like, why can't you do what I do? Like, why can't you be as good as I am? And so in their mind, I think they need to push these people to be as close to they can be, however they can. I think that meant pushing people a little bit, belittling people. maybe not exactly how I would have gone about it. I'm not terribly bothered by Jordan doing it because of the results. And let's be real. There are assholes and jerks in every company, every walk of life, work, whatever you do. There's going to be somebody that's like that. But not saying that this is right, but they'll get away with it because if they have delivered results. If Michael Jordan delivered results. And I think what people should acknowledge is a couple things Michael Jordan said in the doc. He never asked his teammates to do anything that he wouldn't do himself. And I think that's why he's not necessarily hated in that way. Now, his teammates might not want to go hang out with him like that, but I don't think he was hated because they knew he put in the work. They knew he put in the time. I think another thing that helps is he had Phil Jackson as the coach who I think allowed the space for things to occur positively and never let it go too far. So, when he punched Steve Kerr in the face, Phil Jackson said, hey, I sent him to the locker room, and Jordan knew that he was wrong. And I think the culture that existed around the team, Phil Jackson in particular, allowed to have the quote-unquote bullying that you saw from Michael Jordan, but never went too far. I'm fine with somebody getting on somebody about them not performing well. I don't really have a big problem with that. I just think as long as it doesn't get too personal, or you're not offending anybody in any way, I don't
context and delivery.
Yeah, context and delivery matters here, right, guys? You can't get personal. You can't obviously talk about somebody's mama or you want to bring up race or religion. That's where you're like, okay, come on, that's too much. That's not cool anywhere. There's no way I'm going to condone that. So, I don't have a big problem with him. I think he led how he thought he needed to lead, and he was 6 for 6 in the finals. So, yeah. I'm sure he and other people can live with those results. I'm sure they sleep well at night with that.
And then, Dexter, I got to ask you as my final question as well, since we're on the topic of MJ, and me and Doug were just chatting about this as well. When you think of basketball GOATs, right? And basketball is one of those rare games that the style of play changes immensely. It could be a span of a year. It could be span of a decade. You name it, it's likely going to change. Unlike football and other sports that take a little bit of time to adjust to different play styles. When I think of MJ versus LeBron in the GOAT debate, right, I don't even pick one because they're both played in different eras and the game was different. How I view it as, I feel like Jordan is the best basketball player and LeBron is kind of the most physically gifted type of basketball athlete, right? Because you look at LeBron for his size, his stature, and everything, and what he's done, even in this year of his career, it's just immense. So what's your opinion on that? Are you one of those guys that when you think of NBA GOAT, do you kind of categorize it as eras, or do you categorize it as this is kind of the poster boy GOAT of the NBA?
Yeah, I'm fine with. I wish more people thought the way you did on that, Chris, and actually wanted to put it into eras. I usually have the same idea when it comes into Brian and I talk about this all the time in the podcast. When we talk about things in terms of like hip hop and people want to rank like who's the best rapper or whatever, and it's just like you kind of got to do that by eras because I think sometimes people get forgotten, right? Or their accomplishments to an era get forgotten. And it's fine. If you want to say Jordan's a great, you want to say it's the GOAT, you want to say LeBron's a GOAT, that's okay. I actually like the way you phrase it in terms that you think that Jordan's the best player, but LeBron is the most physically gifted athlete. And I think that's pretty accurate. I think most people would agree with that. I also will, to be fair to LeBron, nobody's had the pressure LeBron had coming out of high school, right? Like because there never was anybody like him before coming out of high school with that much pressure on them as they came into the league. And to some degree, he might have had Michael Jordan's record or all his accomplishments, but he's done pretty damn well. If you ask me, if somebody put a gun to my head and they're like, pick a player, I'm gonna pick Jordan. But I don't have a problem breaking it down the way you did because I think what also happens, Chris, is people forget about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Yeah. And I didn't see him play, but if you look at YouTube highlights and you look at this man's impact on the game and the shot he had with the sky hook and how unblockable that is, I think it's like if somebody wants to tell me Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is the best player they ever saw, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. So I think we are probably all biased by our errors in what we saw to some degree, and I think that happens in a lot of things. But to that point, that's why I think it actually is important and actually probably more accurate to look at things by error. However, I think people just a lot of times like to say, it's like, I declared this person the GOAT. They're the GOAT of the greatest of all time, right? So nobody can say anything above that. And looking at things by errors, I think is definitely, it's more accurate, and it actually helps tell the history of basketball, music, whatever sport you're talking about actually better if you look at it that way. Because, there are rules Jordan played with that LeBron doesn't play with. There are some people, I don't necessarily agree with this, who think the brand of basketball in the 90s is way better than it was today. I'm not somebody who agrees with that, because I think there's actually more talent in the league today, and players are way more skilled in general than they were in the 90s. Now, that doesn't mean that I think if you drop Jordan in today's game that he still wouldn't be Jordan. Oh, he still would. He might actually average a little bit more. But great players are going to be great in any era. But I do think, man, I agree with you on that let's look at these things by errors, and it also helps us give people their flowers and their due while they're still playing. Like, I think there's no doubt that LeBron is the greatest of this current era. There's no doubt to me on that. I think Jordan was the greatest of his era. And I think when Kobe played for a time transitioning the two, he was the best of his era. So yeah, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, because I agree with that. Because whenever there's a GOAT conversation in sports, or really in anything, there's always going to be what ifs, right? Like you said, what if Jordan played in this era? What if LeBron had the coaching that MJ had, the consistent coaching? There's so many kind of tools, what ifs, questions on that as well. But a lot of people, like I said before, it's just kind of like you said, you made a good point there as well with errors. People are kind of biased towards their errors because they got to kind of witness it, right? I may be, just because I seen LeBron, and like before I even get to that, I like your take on the high school take as well, because you're correct on that. No one had the hype coming out of high school like LeBron at the time, because KG, no. Zion, okay, yeah, but he was more of a highlight machine in college. He didn't have pressure. He was more of just that guy that you just tuned into Ball is Life or any type of other highlight channel, or even on social media, you just see him doing a windmill dunk or dunking over kids, or the meme may going around saying Zion's playing with kids. And you get that. And I agree with that take, because I feel like people my age especially, they're biased towards LeBron because they got to see it. But at the same time, you see the Jordan doc, and then the questions start to raise, like you were mentioning, the what ifs, Jordan in this era. GOATs, like I agree with your point there as well. GOATs will always be good in around any type of adjustment. MJ in this league, you never know what he could average. He'd probably average a little more. LeBron back then, you don't know how he's going to deal with the bad boy Pistons defense and stuff like that, but there's always going to be what ifs. Right. So that's how I'll wrap it. Yep. Always will be that. Always will be that, indeed, for sure. Well, thanks again, Dexter, for joining us. We really appreciate you taking some time out of your night talking to Doug and I. It was a very fun recording.
Yeah, man, fun. I had a really good. Love to come back. Really like what you guys are doing, and continue, man. Just continue to grow and continue to build. And the Wingspan podcast is getting its wings. It's taking off. So, yeah,
sure.
I like it.
We got to get you and Brian on at the same time. Have like a podcast going. That would be cool.
We've done that a couple times with some other podcasts, and they're always fun. So, like, let's do it. Brian's gonna laugh a lot more and like slap his table.
I was gonna say,
He'll do that, but it'll be fun, man. It'll absolutely be fun.
Well, we really want to thank you. Thank you for taking time out of your day and night for this. Stay safe. Keep listening to the experts, and just keep doing all what you're doing.
I will, man. Thank you.
Time to give closing remarks.
Yeah, so guys, feel free to remember to send over any suggestions, questions, comments, or thoughts on any of our content by sending an email to wingspanpodcast@gmail.com. And do not forget to follow us on our social media channels such as Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And finally, make sure to subscribe to our podcast on your preferred listening service. As for next time, stay classy, take care, and stay safe.